May 23, 2010. Shannan Gilbert was 22 years old. She was an escort working on Long Island, New York. At approximately 5 in the morning, she called 911 from a client's home in Ocean Beach. She was screaming. She told the dispatcher someone was trying to kill her. The call lasted 22 minutes. Then she ran from the house into the dark. She was never seen alive again. Police were called. They searched the area. They found nothing. 7 months later, investigators came back. They were still looking for Shannan. What they found instead changed the case entirely. In December of 2010, searching through dense brush along Ocean Parkway on Long Island's Barrier Island, police found a body. Then another. Then another. Then another. 4 women wrapped in burlap, hidden in the scrub brush along a remote stretch of parkway. All 4 had worked as escorts. All 4 had advertised on Craigslist. All 4 had disappeared without the kind of attention that their disappearances deserved. They kept searching. By April of 2011, there were 10 sets of human remains along that stretch of road. 10 people. Some had been there for years. Some for over a decade. And the man who put them there had been commuting to work in Manhattan every morning, living with his wife and children in a quiet neighborhood 30 miles away, known to his neighbors as a family man. For 13 years, nobody looked at him once. Their names deserve to be said. Melissa Bartholomew, 24 years old, from Delphi Falls, New York. She disappeared in July of 2009. Maureen Brainard Barnes, 25 years old, from Norridge, Connecticut. She disappeared in July of 2007. Amber Lynn Costello, 27 years old, from West Babylon, New York. She disappeared in September of 2010. Megan Waterman, 22 years old, from South Portland, Maine. She disappeared in June of 2010. Sandra Costilla, 28 years old, originally from Trinidad and Tobago. She disappeared in November of 1993. Jessica Taylor, 20 years old, from Lumberton, North Carolina. She disappeared in 2003. Valerie Mack, 24 years old. Her identity was unknown for a decade before DNA identified her in 2020. And 3 others whose identities took years to confirm. These women were all working in the sex trade. They were all advertising on Craigslist or similar platforms. They were all vulnerable. And that vulnerability was known to the man who chose them. He specifically targeted women he believed would not be aggressively searched for. Women whose disappearances would be treated as lifestyle decisions. Women whose families would be told they probably just moved on. He was right. For years, that is exactly what happened. The families called police. The police filed reports. The women were listed as missing persons. And the investigation went nowhere. This case has 2 stories running alongside each other. The story of the victims, and the story of what law enforcement did and failed to do for 13 years. The Suffolk County Police Department had problems that went beyond investigative failures. In 2015, their police chief, James Burke, resigned under a cloud of misconduct allegations. He was later convicted of conspiracy to obstruct justice and civil rights violations. Burke had personally assaulted a suspect who stole from his car. He covered it up. And during his tenure, the investigation into the Gilgo Beach murders was compromised. A department detective later claimed that Burke denied subpoenas for records related to cell phone towers. A police commissioner stated publicly that detectives were prevented from sharing information with an FBI unit that could have helped profile the killer. The investigation that should have been coordinated with federal resources was being actively blocked by the man running the department. Burke was internally investigated for drug use and relationships with sex workers. He served nearly 4 years in federal prison. His obstruction directly affected the timeline of this case. How directly is something investigators are still trying to determine. Because while Burke was obstructing the investigation, Rex Heumann was still out there. Still killing. Still walking the streets of Manhattan every morning. Still going home to his family every night. Rex Andrew Heumann was born on September 13, 1963. He grew up in Nassau County, Long Island. He became an architect. He built a career in Manhattan, running his own firm from a Midtown office. He was married. He had children. He owned a house in Massapequa Park, a quiet suburb of Nassau County. On the surface, there was nothing to look at. He was not a drifter. He was not a transient. He was not someone with a violent criminal record. He was a licensed professional who paid his taxes and drove his car to work. But on his computer, investigators would eventually find 46 cell phones, a collection of violent bondage pornography, and a document, a planning document, written by him in excruciating detail. It contained checklists, steps to take before and after a murder, how to limit noise, how to clean a body, how to package remains for transport, how to destroy evidence, notes on what to do differently next time, specific language about avoiding DNA, specific language about disposal. He had thought about this carefully. For years, he had killed women who advertised for clients online. He contacted them using burner phones purchased with cash. He drove them in his Chevrolet Avalanche to remote locations. He killed them. He wrapped their bodies in burlap. He drove to Ocean Parkway in the middle of the night and disposed of them in the brush. Then he drove home. The investigation that should have caught Heumann years earlier was revived in January of 2022. The Suffolk County District Attorney created a new dedicated multi-agency task force. New technology, new subpoenas, new eyes on old evidence. Investigators went back through records from the time of the murders. They found something they had not fully pursued. A witness had seen Amber Costello get into a vehicle near her home in West Babylon the night she disappeared. The vehicle was described as a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. When investigators ran that detail against vehicle registration records, one name appeared: Rex Heumann. He had owned a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. They began to dig. More than 300 subpoenas, search warrants, cell phone mapping. Investigators found that burner phones used to contact victims had pinged cell towers in 2 locations consistently: near Heumann's office in Midtown Manhattan and near his home in Massapequa Park. His personal phone was in the same areas at the same times. The case was building, but they needed physical evidence. DNA. They put Heumann under surveillance. In January of 2023, they watched him walk out of a pizza restaurant on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. He threw a pizza box into a trash can on the sidewalk. Investigators retrieved it. They extracted DNA from the leftover crust. They compared it to a hair found on the burlap wrapping Megan Waterman's body. The match was confirmed. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heumann was arrested at his Midtown Manhattan office. He was 59 years old. His wife and children were in Iceland for the summer. They were always in Iceland for the summer. That was when he killed. When investigators searched Human's home in Massapequa Park, they found 350 electronic devices. Phones, laptops, hard drives. On one of those devices was the planning document. The district attorney described it as a blueprint for murder. It detailed how he approached his crimes, how he selected victims, how he communicated with them using untraceable phones, how he managed the physical evidence. There were notes in the document about specific things to do differently. Notation about hitting a victim in the face or neck. Notation about using heavier rope. Language suggesting he was refining his method across multiple killings. He had been doing this since at least 1993. Sandra Costilla was 28 years old when she was killed that year. Her remains were found by hunters in North Sea, Long Island. For 30 years, her murder was considered unsolved. Then investigators compared DNA from hair found on her body to Rex Human. It matched. 30 years. One man. 7 confirmed victims. A planning document that described his crimes as something to be prepared for and improved upon. A family who did not know what lived inside the house with them. These women were not just victims of a serial killer. They were victims of a system that had decided, before any investigation began, that their lives mattered less. Women who advertised escort services on Craigslist were not expected to receive the same investigative response as other missing persons. Their families filed reports. The reports sat. The families called back. They were told there was nothing new. Melissa Bartholomew's family received phone calls after her disappearance. Taunting phone calls. A male voice on the other end admitting to killing her. Admitting to sexual assault. They reported those calls to police. Police traced the calls to cell towers in Manhattan. The investigation did not pursue that lead the way it should have. The lead sat. Rex Human kept killing. When his arrest was announced in July of 2023, the shock was not just that he had been caught. It was what he was. A family man with a career and a mortgage and children, and a life that looked completely ordinary from the outside. The kind of person who is never supposed to be capable of this. Who is never supposed to have done this for 30 years. Who is never supposed to have a planning document on his computer with notes about doing it better next time. That document existed. It has been submitted as evidence. And as of this week, Rex Human is expected to change his plea to guilty. The families of 7 women are waiting for that moment. They have been waiting for a long time already. 10 sets of remains along a stretch of highway on Long Island's South Shore. Hidden in the brush, wrapped in burlap, left there at night by a man who drove home afterward. Shannan Gilbert called 911 from a client's house in 2010 and said someone was trying to kill her. Her call lasted 22 minutes. She ran into the dark. Her remains were found over a year later in a nearby marsh. She was the reason police searched that highway. She was not connected to Human. But without her, the 10 bodies in the brush along Ocean Parkway might have stayed hidden for years longer. 7 of those deaths are now charged to Rex Human, an architect who commuted to Manhattan, who sent his family to Iceland every summer, who kept a planning document on his computer with notes about doing it better next time, who walked past 10,000 people every day and none of them knew. He is expected to plead guilty this week. 30 years after the first woman he is charged with killing was found in the woods in North Sea, Long Island. 30 years. and the families of 7 women are finally about to hear him say what he did. In a courtroom, out loud. Did you follow the Gilgo Beach case when the bodies were first found in 2010? And do you think there are more victims we still do not know about? Tell me below.